Hey everybody, and welcome back to another max velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a massive severe weather outbreak that'll begin today and go all the way through tomorrow. That'll cause the potential for damaging winds, large hail, and several tornadoes. And we'll also be talking about the potential for a large winter storm over the next several days. I'll give you the latest breakdown on both of these events and more in this forecast. But let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today, beginning with the Rocky Mountains, which is where that low pressure system is currently strengthening. And you're probably wondering, what low pressure system is this? Well, this is the one that's actually going to bring a slew of events, including that big severe weather outbreak today and tomorrow, along with the threat for a winter storm over the next few days that'll track all the way through the Central Plains and even into the Midwest that could dump upwards of a foot of snow in some areas. So a very eventful next few days are ahead. Areas in the southern plains back through the Dixie Valley and even all the way through the Ohio Valley are currently bracing for that threat of severe weather later today and even through tomorrow. Now, in terms of what's going to evolve over the next 24 hours with that low pressure system, take a closer look down near Oklahoma. That is where that low pressure system will be developing with a fairly strong pressure gradient, which would indicate some stronger wind speeds as well. And we'll be watching for the threat of that winter storm to develop in the Central Plains. That'll move through the Midwest, impacting areas like Chicago with a few inches of snow over that direction. And then we'll be watching Thursday morning for that threat of a severe weather outbreak. That is going to cover a very large area, which I will show you here in just a second. This trough will continue to move off to the north and east, impacting areas all the way through the East Coast. Some snowfall may go towards New England, but it would probably be in the very northern tier of New England into Canada. But overall, that would be about it. By the weekend, most of the United States will be dry, and it looks like a fantastic Saturday and Sunday for you. So if you have any plans for this weekend, it does look pretty fabulous across a large chunk of the United States. Beginning with tonight, there is an enhanced risk of severe weather that is going to include areas back near Tennessee, Arkansas, northwest Mississippi, and even southern sections of Kentucky. This is for the main threat of a tornado threat. I'll show you more of that here in just a second. Slight risk goes all the way back through North Texas and even into areas in southern sections of Louisiana. Now, one thing to point out is that there is actually a hatched area for hail, and it is a very small area, and this will be an area that we have to watch for closely this evening because there will be a cap in place. And what I mean by a cap is that it is essentially a lid on the atmosphere, so clouds can only build up so high with a cap in place. Once that cap is overcome, we can see supercell thunderstorms develop. So if that does occur tonight, we could very well see some significant hail. Upwards of 2-inch diameter, even maybe slightly greater than that, is not out of the question if that cap can be overcome. But the bigger concern tonight will definitely be the tornado threat, especially back out to the east in areas like Mississippi and again Tennessee and Arkansas. We do have a chance for maybe an isolated strong tornado tonight in this area that is hatched and in the yellow shaded area. That is a 10% probability within a 25-mile radius of a tornado. So going into later this afternoon and evening, there will not be a whole lot of storm activity until about 5 to 6 o'clock in North Texas and Oklahoma. That is when some storms will start to fire up. We'll also be watching some isolated storm activity fire up around 7 o'clock or so tonight, and this will be the potential for, again, damaging winds, large hail, and the potential for maybe a tornado or two. Eventually going closer to about 9-10 o'clock, we'll be watching a line of storms develop. This will be kind of a bit more on the weaker end unless you're in southern sections of Oklahoma and northern sections of Texas. Those are the two areas that I have most concerns about for severe weather tonight. Back through areas over in the mid-Mississippi Valley, we'll be watching for some storm activity over that direction. This all eventually shifts out to the east going into Thursday morning. Now, back over in Arkansas, as I mentioned before, we'll be watching for some storm activity firing up later this evening. So probably around 8, 9, 10 o'clock is when we might see a couple of these storms back near Memphis potentially produce the threat for severe weather. Eventually going into the overnight hours, we'll be watching still maybe a couple of storms along that dry line that could actually have a chance for maybe an isolated tornado threat and even some damaging winds as well. And even back near Memphis, we'll still be watching some severe weather activity. And then eventually going into the morning hours Thursday, most of that activity will shift off to the east. Now, Kentucky and as well as Tennessee, storm activity is expected probably later this evening, so just after 8, 9 o'clock. We'll watch a lot of storms overnight tonight. This could cause the threat for some flash flooding as well, so be mindful of that. Again, turn around, don't drown if you see any flooded roadways. Eventually going into Thursday morning, we'll be watching another cluster of storms over in eastern sections of Tennessee as well as into Kentucky, and eventually going closer to lunchtime, we'll be watching another round of storms fire up. This could produce all modes of severe weather as well, including damaging winds, large hail, and a tornado threat. Damaging winds currently being the main concern, and eventually going to Thursday evening, it all becomes rain for the most part as that system continues to move off to the east. Now, I couldn't even fit in a regional area for this severe weather event tomorrow because it is just so large. This is the day 2 outlook. This for tomorrow. There is a massive enhanced risk of severe weather in terms of its length. It goes all the way from Mississippi into Ohio, and we have a marginal threat that goes all the way back up into New York. It is a huge area that we're watching for tomorrow. This is for the threat primarily for damaging winds. That is why there's an enhanced risk, but there is also a chance for maybe an isolated significant tornado threat going into tomorrow afternoon in the lower Mississippi Valley, closer to the southeast for those in Alabama and eastern Mississippi. So this will be definitely an area to watch for a tornado threat, and this has a lot to do with a strong low-level jet tomorrow. This will start to stir up some of these storms so they can actually become much stronger in terms of their rotation in the lower levels. So this will be an area to watch. We could have a low-level jet upwards of 40 to 50 knots. Even an isolated area near 60 knots is possible, which is a big concern because these storms will rapidly rotate with this sort of environment. Another big thing is the instability. So for example, today there's a lot of instability down in Texas. This is all rising up with a lot of moisture. Strong daylight heating will translate to a lot of instability later this afternoon and evening, and eventually even going into tomorrow. Instability values upwards of 500 to 600 will extend as far north as areas like Ohio and maybe even into Pennsylvania. So it is a very large area that we're watching for severe weather tomorrow. Now let's talk about that main concern for tomorrow being the tornado threat back down in Alabama and Mississippi. So storm activity during the morning will be very limited. We'll be watching a couple of isolated storms. Severe weather not really expected until around lunchtime tomorrow is when we'll start to see some showers and storms forming from Louisiana all the way back through areas near Florence. These could very well rapidly intensify and produce the threat for a tornado or two. Going closer to 3 to 4 o'clock is when we'll be watching a much more numerous and widespread area of showers and storms. So our greatest tornado threat is currently expected to be closer to lunchtime in comparison to around 5 to 6 o'clock, mainly due to the fact we'll just have so much storm activity out there. Eventually going closer to 9 to 10 o'clock, storms will move into areas in eastern Alabama and eventually move into areas like Georgia overnight going into Friday morning, where there is a low chance for severe weather on Friday, but currently it is very low. Not really anything to be too concerned about for now. Back through Tennessee and Kentucky, again, we already talked about this area once, but there will be a lot of storm activity overnight tonight. This will translate to the potential for some flash flooding. Eventually going into the morning hours, we'll be watching another round of storms forming Thursday afternoon, and eventually going closer to the evening, storms will move into areas in the eastern half of both states, and then eventually going closer to about 10 to 11 o'clock, mostly just rain remaining for those near Pikeville, Knoxville, and Johnson City, while areas like Nashville, Elizabethtown, as well as Louisville will all start to clear out there. In terms of general timing and whatnot, for those a bit further off to the north, storms will fire up most likely closer to lunchtime back up in Ohio, and going through the afternoon is when we might see some storms there. Those could go as far north and east as areas like Pennsylvania and New York, so keep a close eye on that. And eventually going through Friday morning, all that shower and storm activity will shift off to the east. Now, I can't fit this into the forecast, unfortunately, but we do have a winter storm coming up. Make sure to check out my latest video. There will be a link at the top of the description so you can check out our latest winter storm forecast. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.